Welcome to Breaking Barriers for Inclusive Manitoba, where we don't just talk about accessibility and inclusion. We question, we challenge, we reimagine. I'm your host, Simran Bhinder, and today we are going beyond policies and infrastructure. We are diving into lived experiences, the kind that expose both the progress we've made and the barriers we still need to dismantle. Before we begin, a special thank you to you Multicultural for providing this platform, this space, and this opportunity to bring forward conversations that matter. You Multicultural exists to amplify diverse voices, voices that deserve to be heard, not just today, but always. A bit about me. I'm an urban and regional planner, accessibility specialist, and DEI advocate. My work spans across urban design, policy reform, accessibility audits, and inclusive transportation strategies. And if there's one thing I have learned, it's this: accessibility isn't a checkbox, it's a human right. I have witnessed firsthand how our conversations about inclusion often get reduced to minimal compliance, as if a ramp or an elevator is the finish line rather than the starting point. The truth? Accessibility isn't a nice-to-have accommodation. It's a fundamental human right that touches every aspect of how we live, we work, and connect. So what does it mean to truly belong? To move through a city without obstacles, both seen and unseen. To have your independence recognized, your contributions valued, your needs respected, not as accommodations, but as non-negotiables. The words disability, accessibility, and barriers get tossed around in policy discussions. But do they actually mean in everyday life? For many Manitobans, barriers aren't just concrete obstacles. They're embedded in attitudes, systems, and everyday interactions that determine who belongs and who gets left behind. Today, we are bringing these realities into sharp focus with two remarkable advocates whose experiences illuminate the path forward. Vivi, a passionate leader with CNIB who navigates the world as someone who is legally blind, challenging perceptions, and creating change through her advocacy work. And Besant, whose journey as an immigrant who later acquired a disability offers unique insights into the intersecting challenges of mobility, communication, and belonging in Manitoba. But let's be clear, these stories aren't just testimonials. They're blueprints for action. They demand that we think differently, plan differently, and above all, do better. So let's get into it, because inclusion isn't a conversation, it's a commitment. So thank you, Vivi and Besant, for joining us today. So let's start with your stories. Welcome, Vivi. Welcome, Besant. I know that each one of you have a unique journey that's shaped your perspective on inclusion in Manitoba. So can you share a defining moment or just share your story about yourself? So Vivi, would you like to start first?
Thanks, Simran, and thank you for having me. So, as you mentioned, I am a person with sight loss. I was born with a congenital eye condition called congenital glaucoma. So I was living with sight loss for most of my life. And then I became blind, as I like to say, in early adulthood. So I've lived with the lived experience of sight loss throughout my life, both as a person with some usable vision and now with a person without any usable vision as a person who is completely non-sighted. I'm also a proud guide dog user, and I have been a part of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind throughout my life, both as a person receiving services and now as a place where I work and work in advocacy to change what it means to be blind for people living with sight loss.
Thank you for sharing that. And I will get back to you because I would like to know more about your journey. I know that you work with CNIB, is that correct?
Yes, I do. I am the program lead for advocacy and community outreach for the CNIB Manitoba division.
That is amazing. So definitely you'll have a lot of experience that needs to be shared. But in terms of what it really means navigating these barriers on daily lives, coming from a person who has a visual impairment and working with a lot of stakeholders who go through the same journey. So Besant, tell us more about yourself.
I was a young person in Canada, but I grew up out here. And I was walking, running, and everything I can think of doing I could do, but all of a sudden I sat in a wheelchair in 1984 December, and I found it very difficult to navigate myself through Canada. But I'm doing the best I can.
Absolutely.
I live on my own. I have some help from the home care and from some good friends.
That is nice. So you came to Canada when? From
In 72.
72. So you moved from Malaysia to Canada, right?
Yeah.
And you said that you developed a disability later in your life, right?
In 84 December.
In 1984.
Yeah.
So you have transitioned from a journey of what we call as able-bodied to a journey where you developed certain disabilities.
Yes.
And I can hear you when you say that it's been difficult navigating Canada when you moved here and you were going through these changes. But still, you kept on working. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you have been contributing as a strong workforce within Canada.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. And I would like to talk more about those because it's important. When we talk about some of these DEI policies, and when we talk about that, the government is trying to support, or would there be any policies where there needs to be any support? There are just so many political conversations around the globe, which is crazy. We all have heard that. But Canada has been very progressive. And also in Manitoba, we have seen progressive policies and regulations coming in that's supporting. But there's still so much work that needs to be done. But we need to be mindful that persons with disabilities, they're only asking for the same right as every other person, every other civilian who's contributing to Canada's economic power or other community support system. They are just trying to participate as a civilian, as a community member. So Vivi, now when we talk about your work, what exactly do you do with CNIB?
The advocacy team of which I'm a part, we do many things, and that can range from one-to-one advocacy. So that could be a person with sight loss calling me or another member of my team across the country to say they've encountered a barrier in society, asking for some guidance, what can they do? And we have a conversation, and we would present them options, and always the work is guided by the individual. So it's not what I think they should do, but when I'm presented with an issue, it's me having a conversation with them saying, these are some things you could do, what would you like to do? And then me helping support them through that. So it can range from anything like writing a letter, helping them craft a letter, approaching a city councillor for a meeting, preparing a deputation if they want to go speak to city council. And then there are national projects that we all work on across the country. So right now we're in the midst of our new 5-year strategic plan, which is called The Way Forward, and it's got 3 areas that we are concentrating on, one of which is transportation, which involves advocating for safe and accessible journeys across the country. So that's from the first kilometer to the last kilometer, we like to say. So everything involved from planning your trip to actually using the mode of transportation you choose to landing at your destination. The next section or part of the strat plan is Our Kids Will Thrive. So that would involve advocating for support for children with sight loss in and outside of the school system. So to make sure they've got all the tech and all the supports that they need in the classroom by teachers, instructors, everybody involved in the school community, and also to make sure that they've got that outside the community of school when they go home to do their assignments, so that their parents are able to assist them and that they have the same technology inside of school as outside of school.
Yeah.
Also, we're advocating for children to have mandatory eye tests before they enter school, because hearing tests are mandatory, but vision tests are not. And most vision sight issues left undetected could be resolved if they had early interventions. And parents, of course, are constantly with their children. So it's sometimes subtle differences in the way that they see that could detect the early stages of an eye condition. And parents aren't just always aware because they see and they know their child, and so they're used to their child, and they may just think that's indicative of the way their child sees. But if we could get early intervention to detect these things and start intervening and methods of prevention, that would also, help our kids thrive in and out of school.
Oh my God, you're actually dealing with some of the most important aspects. It's about raising awareness, guiding them through navigating or helping them navigate these systems. It's really essential. And I love the fact when you mentioned about transportation from first kilometer to last kilometer. Yes, you talked about planning the trip and, of course, reaching your destination, and then, of course, back from your destination to your original start or origin. It's really important, and we seldom don't talk about the planning aspect of it. It's really heavy when it comes to persons with disabilities, because things are not as smooth as we think, or as the ableist approach usually considers that things need to be done. So if I have to talk about your personal experience, how did you find CNIB? How did you navigate the system? It's a lot of barriers. What barriers did you face?
Well, I've been registered with CNIB since I was born, because I was born with an eye condition. And I had sort of intermediate contact with them throughout my life. So when I was predominantly a sighted person and using the sight that I had, I wasn't really involved with CNIB because I was getting everything I needed from the school system and the education system. But I would say I returned to receive services when I entered university, because then I needed more supports, like financial support to access technology and learning to navigate an institution that was larger than my high school. So I needed white cane training and navigational training, and I needed to be competent with that in order to be able to get a guide dog, which I now have. And accessing other services like learning how to do tasks around the home for, vision rehab therapy, we call it now. So, just maintaining a household and all of the things that are involved with that as a person with sight loss. So I would say more in adulthood than my early life I've accessed services, but they are a great resource for, navigating just the lived experience, and that anything a person would go through. They have employment services, educational services that I all accessed when I was on my academic path, and then when I was seeking employment. So many supports to help a person navigate the journey of sight loss.
And this is actually interesting, and it's a lot. And if I have to ask, was it easy for you to find these support systems in Canada?
I would say relatively easy, because CNIB has all of those services as part of their, mandate, so that it's kind of accessible to you, whatever you need when you need it. You don't have to take everything all at once, depending on where you are in your stage of, sight loss and what you're able to do and comfortable doing. They have everything available to you when you're ready to access services.
Absolutely. So that means CNIB and organizations like these, they are a great support system for persons with disabilities, because they can help, and sometimes they could be the amazing bridge to some of the life opportunities that people seek. This is incredible, and I am going to come back to you about another aspect. But before that, Besant, you have shared with me that you were working with ILRC. Would you like to share more about your work, and were you given the training? How was it for you?
Working with ILRC is quite interesting because all the people we have were. And I've been doing that entry for a while now. And few people recommended me when I became disabled that ILC do disabled people. So maybe you can get some points from them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is pretty interesting, I would say, working with the ILC, yeah.
That's amazing. So you have been working as a data analyst or data entry?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Entry.
you were given the support to continue doing that work. And recently you have been retired, right?
Actually, I was not with them from the start. I was at the first medical school retired dates at the Possibility.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Then I came to Winnipeg. I worked a while with Lawyer first. Then I worked with the Canadian Book and News
Okay.
on L Street. Then I came to ILRC. Then I became disabled. I came to ILRC.
So you joined ILRC when you developed disability. So before that, you were working with other organizations.
Yeah,
That's
when I
interesting
was
to know.
working, I only joined the IRC when I became disabled.
Right. And how your journey from when you found out that you had a disability and you joined ILRC, how things have changed for you? For example, getting out of your house, transportation, and coming to work, going to your medical appointments. How have you navigated that?
Well, it's difficult, of course,
Yeah.
but to go to all this place I can transit,
Mm-hmm.
there's no other way of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm here alone, my family's not here. I take a handy transit, which will take you always not on time, but reach you back late, never on time. I find it quite difficult, really, doing things on my own.
It's interesting. So you're mentioning that you have relied heavily on which was earlier called handy transit for your transportation services. It has been very helpful, and we have to admit that having a paratransit service is really essential for persons with disabilities. You've mentioned about the affordability aspect. You have also mentioned about sometimes it's difficult to book, or sometimes it's the time which comes into play. But still, finding a service which is there to help you when you want to navigate or go to places is really essential. And we are glad that actually Manitoba has the service. City of Winnipeg is providing this service. And now when we talk about transportation or planning, Vivi, I would like to also ask this question to you. You mentioned about planning a trip. when we talk about planning, we seldom forget how much efforts it takes to plan a trip for a person with disability to go to places, be it the medical appointment, be it their work, or be it sometimes, just going out for grocery or some other recreational activity. So how long does it take for you to plan your trips?
Well, it depends on where and when I want to go. I know that using the paratransit service that we have here in Winnipeg, they allow you to book a week in advance. So as soon as I know that I want to go somewhere, if I'm using that para service, I will book as soon as I know, because it's not a priority system. It's a first come, first serve, and I want to make sure that I get my ride booked in an appropriate amount of time. For example, if I'm using it for work, I would book as soon as I knew when I had to be at work, so that I would have the best opportunity possible of having that trip honored. And,
Right.
In terms of bus transportation, it's still planning, but in a different way, because you want to plan your route, when you're leaving, when you would arrive, what connections you'd have to make along the way, and give yourself enough time to make those connections if you need to. And then you want to take into account the weather conditions, because I know some of the apps give you an estimated walking time, and I think that's for a robust, healthy person under ideal conditions. So that estimate doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and under every circumstance of weather. It involves some planning, even imagining how you would execute your route, never mind actually taking the route that you've planned for yourself.
Yes. And do you mind me asking, do you live by yourself, or do you have someone who's there to support you?
I have family support. However, when that family support isn't around or available, like when they go on vacation, then I have to coordinate and plan all of that myself, and make sure that I am accountable to my employer and I arrive at work on time. So
Yes, because these policies don't change for anyone.
Right.
So absolutely, and it could be really challenging at times navigating all of that.
Yeah.
If the systems are not accessible, we do talk about digital accessibility. Let's not even talk about the built environment accessibility. Even digital environment is not that accessible. We know that the guidelines in Accessible Manitobans Act do talk about, following the WCAG guidelines, and now we have the updated standards, which will keep updating because things will keep coming. But sometimes, is it difficult for you to, I'm just trying to understand, when you're navigating websites, do you think that our public websites, they have come far when it comes to accessibility compliance, or there are still struggles, for example, navigating some of the options, finding the right policy or right information, or even booking your ride?
yeah, I think progress has been made, but there's always progress yet to go. So everything I think could always be made more accessible, and accessible is subjective. So if I come at it from a sight loss perspective, I want things read to me, whereas a person who still has some usable vision may want high contrast, which isn't helpful for me, but it's helpful for them. And then someone with other lived experience, like neurodivergent, that might be too stimulating for them. So there's all of these considerations to be made and to be thought of. But I always think there's constantly room for improvement, and lots of work done and lots of work yet to be done. And I know it's bothersome for me, not necessarily on a public website, but I know some websites that I've been on before, when you have forms to fill out and there's a time limit, and because I'm using Access technology, it takes me a little longer to read through things, and by the time I get to the spot where I'm supposed to enter the data, the window is closed, and the website closes, and I have to start the whole process over again. So those are things that I think could be improved. Although I understand, they're there for a reason. That's often sensitive information you're inputting, and you don't want to have a window open too long in case of a security breach. But,
Right.
I want to think there could be workarounds or guidelines put in place to extend that, say, have an accessibility box. Like if you check this box saying you have an accessibility need, maybe the timeline could be extended for you under these circumstances.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. There's always going to be scope for improving accessibility and inclusion practices, but that involves bringing different people together. Like you've mentioned, there are people who are neurodivergent who might have a different need in terms of, when we are providing certain things. For instance, a person who has mobility need would require certain things different than the others. And also for person who have visual impairments, they would have specific different needs. And that's why consistency and familiarity is important when we design our infrastructure. Besant, you have mentioned that you live by yourself in your apartment and you do have home care support coming. How is that experience for you? Because you do pay your rent,
Yes,
you
I
pay your bills, so you are contributing, so you have all the rights to ask for, which we call accommodation requests. But how do you feel about asking for accessible accommodations?
How I feel? I feel all right now. I do tell them accessible things in my apartment. If I can't get, I usually tell them to do the accessible for me.
Yeah.
And my dealing with the home care is all right. Some are good, some not so good. But I really bad because I have to.
Yeah.
I can't do things on my own, certain things.
Yes.
Yes, so
That's interesting because I've had so many conversations where people would say that we hesitate asking for accessibility accommodations. And it really feels unfair because if you are contributing to the economy, to in all ways possible, you are supporting community by doing volunteer services. Like you yourself, you're doing volunteer service right now. But as for Vivi, you have your guide dog with you. Do you think Manitoba's environment is prepared for guide dogs, or there's a lot that needs to be done?
If you're talking about infrastructure, like the built environment, I mean, we could always do with improved sidewalks and better snow clearing and things like that. I think the customer service industry
it makes it easy for wheelchair.
could always, be informed about welcoming guide dogs into public spaces because they are welcome everywhere the public is able to go. We have a campaign that we work on at CNIB every September, actually, because it is Guide Dog Access Awareness Month. And so we speak to various members of the public, just reminding them that guide dogs are able to travel with their person wherever their person needs to go because they are a mobility tool and they assist their person to have the independence that they need to navigate the environment. But unfortunately, we still encounter obstacles and barriers to guide dog access with various forms of transportation, sometimes taxis, ride refusals with ride shares, customer service, people in retail or in restaurants not understanding that it is a guide dog, it is performing a service, it does have the right to be there supporting its person.
Absolutely. So there is still need of raising awareness.
Yes.
It's not about that people don't want to understand. It's just they do lack the practical or applied advocacy sometimes, even though organizations are trying so hard. But still, there is still need of raising that information, raising that awareness. And it needs to come Of course, we do need support from Manitoba government, from our city officials, from decision makers. But it's also important, how can we communicate? How can we make things easier to understand? Because if that's not started from the beginning, and when beginning I'm saying that I think it's a privilege, and I think it's a blessing that you were able to connect with CNIB from very early age. But there are people who would still try to struggle, and they're struggling to find the right platform where they could get proper guidance. And it's important that if our city officials or Manitoba government could actually bridge that gap. If there's more information out there, how can we provide some of these support systems? That would be really helpful. And I know that, Besant, you've mentioned, you were talking about, there still need to be places that are more accessible for wheelchairs. And I do remember that when I first met you and we had this conversation and we were trying to find a place to meet, you said that it's still difficult to find places that are accessible.
Yes.
And
sometimes emotions are not accessible,
Yes, absolutely. And it's about dignity as well. We do forget the dignity aspect when we talk about inclusive practices and accessible practices. It's all about making that person feel empowered, independent when they're doing their regular chores. And they're not asking to be the rock star of a movie or, anything. They just want to live their life independently with dignity, just like anybody else. If I have to ask both of you one question, and this is about for immigrants. For immigrants who are new to Canada, or their families who are new to Canada, and they're trying to navigate disability, because disability could be situational, it could be temporary, it could be anything that develops over a time, just like Besant, this happened to you. It developed at a certain time and doctors were still trying to understand. What one advice would you share to help them advocate effectively in this new country, in this system, or especially in Manitoba?
I would say speak up your mind, what you have in your mind. Might as well tell them first before you do anything, Yeah, you need some accessible things, and you need some easy navigating.
Yeah.
And you need some help from people. Might as well tell them first.
Yes, I like that, to not be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And there are institutions around, so reach out for that help. I completely understand and agree with that. Vivi, what would be your advice?
Yeah, my advice would be pretty much the same. I understand that, coming to Canada, we may have a different perspective about disability than in other parts of the world. I am a daughter of immigrants, so, there are different cultural perspectives about disability that I've also experienced in my life. But I would say, do not be afraid to reach out and access the services that are available, because there are communities here that want to help and are able to help and can provide sources of support and assistance that will enable you to become the involved member of society that you want to be. And so it doesn't have to be a limitation to have a lived experience of disability.
Yes.
Just be encouraged to reach out to those places that will be able to support and strengthen you and help you be a part of that lived experience and, of course, of the wider community.
Absolutely. This is beautiful, and I think this would be super helpful for a lot of people. This whole conversation, I think it has not just touched aspects on the surface level, but you shared your lived experiences and how you have been able to navigate. You have found, or maybe you're still in the process of finding purpose to live and, continue contributing to the community, to become part of the community in most respectful manner. Thank you so much, Vivi and Besant, for your honesty, for your resilience, and of course, your vision. These stories are not really about challenges. I think you are talking about more opportunities, that there are so many avenues where we could still do better. And this is what's most important right now. I think about what Manitoba can be when we design with equity, dignity, and intentionality. This is how things would shape up. So, to our audience, this is where your part begins. Share these stories, challenge the barriers that you see, and of course, question the system that exclude, or maybe try and reach out for more information and awareness. Because inclusion is just not about physical access. It's about creating a society where presence is valid, it's valued, and where your voices are heard. A special thanks again to you, Multicultural, for making this platform possible, for making these conversations possible. And this isn't really the end of the conversation. So let's keep questioning, keep challenging, and let's keep breaking the barriers together. Thank you once again, and we'll see you again soon.